this breathing technique is rapid contractions using the diaphragm. Okay. So it's going to look something like this. I'll demonstrate first and then we can do it together. So watch my belly. So on and so forth. We're going to do a set of 108 breaths of fire. Okay, so this is going to take a while. Today's class is very focused on breath work, but also core strength, and generally just breath awareness in a lot of these postures that we do. So we're going to be slowing things down a little bit today, but I promise you, just because things are a little bit slower does not mean that they're necessarily going to be any easier. In fact, things might get a lot more challenging. I'm sure you've experienced this in the past. When you slow things down, they sometimes get a lot harder. So we're going to be learning how core strength, core capacity is very deeply related to our breath work and to our breathing patterns in general, and how the core is really not just six pack. It's not just the abdominals. It's not just the stuff you see on the surface. It's definitely not just the stuff on the front of our body either. It's the stuff all around this section between the bottom of our rib cage and our hips. And it really, really is deeply involved in all of these movements that we do. But if we can bring in awareness of how we're breathing, as well as how the core is moving and contributing to all of these different patterns we practice, we can really enhance our experience during these classes. We can feel better. We can improve our endurance and our strength just by changing the way in which we breathe and bringing a bit more awareness to the way in which we breathe. Okay. So today, we're actually going to start lying down on our backs with bent knees. So we're going to start laying down on our back today with our knees bent. And I want you to find a nice long spine. Just lay your arms down by your side with your palms facing up. And I want you to just take a few deep breaths in and out. As you breathe in, feel your belly rising. And as you breathe out, feel your belly falling downward towards your spine. Breathing in, feeling the belly rise. Breathing out, feeling the belly fall downwards towards the spine. Sort of hollowing out, creating this big space. Breathing in, feeling the belly rise. Filling up that space with air. Breathing out, feeling the belly fall. Emptying that space, emptying the lungs completely. And now as you're breathing, as you're relaxing in your laying posture here, I want you to start to bring some awareness to the tip of your nose. And I want you to make note. See if you can tell if one nostril is more open than the other one. Or maybe they're both equally open. Maybe they're both closed. Maybe there's a subtle difference between one or the other. Continue breathing and just tune into this area, listening closely to the sound of air passing in and out through the nose. And seeing if you can feel each nostril, feeling the air rushing past the tip of the nose up into the nasal cavity and down into the lungs. And if you do notice that one nostril is more open than the other one, I want you to take a mental note. So for me, my left nostril is much more open than the right at this moment. Now we're going to start moving a little bit here. So I want you to open your eyes and prepare yourself to start working a little bit. I know this posture can be very relaxing, but we do have to start moving, start getting the sweat on. And from here, what I want you to do is reach your arms up for the sky. Spread your fingers wide and reach the tips of your fingers as high as you can. Take a deep inhale, feeling the belly rise. And then as you exhale, feel the belly fall inward towards the spine. But I also want you to lift your head and the backs of your shoulders from the floor, reaching your fingertips even higher. And then inhale, belly rises, and we lower our shoulders and our head back down to the floor. Exhale, lift the shoulders, lift the head, reach higher. Inhale back. Exhale, lifting up, reaching high. Inhale back. Exhale, lift and reach, almost like we're performing a crunch. And then inhale back. Exhale, lift and reach. Inhale back. And I want you to continue with these repetitions. Take them slow, take them at your own pace, and really see how much contraction you can get in your core as you lift up and reach. Notice that you can really use the exhalation to help enhance the contraction of your core. And even a very simple movement like this can start to really get a good burn in the abdominals and in the much deeper layers of the core as well. If you do any pelvic floor work as well, I want you to contract the floor of your pelvis, contract your glutes and your hips as you lift up and exhale. If you're a yogi and you're familiar with any of your bandhas or your locks, you can use your root lock as you do this as well. If you don't know what I mean by that, don't worry about it. Just keep breathing. Keep moving. And really feel that burn in the core. It should be coming on pretty strong by now. Let's do one more. Inhaling back. Exhaling forward. This time hold the breath out. Reach as high as you can. And then inhale back, and you can release, bringing your elbows down to the floor. And we're actually going to proceed with our wrist mobilizations, just lying down today. So as you give your core a little bit of a break, we're going to interlace our fingers and start to roll our wrists around one another, proceeding with our snowballs. And we're going to switch directions. And then we're going to move on to our spinning lotus, locking the wrists together. Arms are straight, fingers spread wide, tucking the thumbs and starting to roll the wrists around one another, bending the elbows, feeding the hands up in front of the face, and continuing with our repetitions. Pretending like we're wearing magnetic wristbands, and at no point through this rotation do our wrists ever separate. In order to do that, we have to keep our fingers spread really wide, and we really have to flex and extend through the wrists as much as we can. Let's do 2 more reps in this direction. And then switch directions. Come back to that starting position. Hands are open, and then we tuck the pinkies and go back the other way. Let's do 1 more. And then shake the hands out. We're going to come up to something like a crab position. So simply crunch yourself up, bring your hands behind you so that your fingers point backwards or out to the sides if your wrists aren't quite warm enough just yet. Bring your feet out a little bit wider than you normally would for your crab position. And we're just going to allow the knees to windshield wiper to the side, sinking into the hips a little bit more, using our hands to shift weight into that internally rotated hip especially. And then we're going to windshield wiper the knees back to neutral and then to the opposite side. Again, using our hands to help sink into that internally rotated hip. And bring that breath awareness into your movement. Inhaling as the knees come up, exhaling as the knees go down. Keeping this movement nice and slow. And using our exhalation to try and sink deeper into this subtle stretch. Let's do one more on either side. And then we're going to come into our crab position. We're going to keep our hips down on the floor for now. But what I want you to do is really pinch your shoulder blades together, open up your chest, gaze upward, and extend through the entire spine, really making sure your whole spine's very active. And I want you to take 3 super slow, super deep breaths in this position. As you inhale, feel your belly rising, and then feel that air filling up the chest and even up into the shoulders. As you exhale, the shoulders kind of drop, the chest collapses, and then the belly draws inward toward the spine. Inhaling, belly expands, chest expands, shoulders expand. Exhale, shoulders drop, chest collapses, belly draws in. One more, taking a complete breath in. And sigh it out through the mouth. From here, we're going to bring our feet a little bit closer. Hover the hips over the floor and proceed with our activations for crab. Number 1, driving the right knee into the chest, lifting the right foot from the floor, and then placing it back down. 2, left foot lifts, driving the knee into the chest and placing it back down. 3, shrugging the right shoulder up towards the ear, lifting the right hand, and then placing it back down. 4, shrugging the left shoulder up towards the ear, and then placing that left hand back down. 5, lifting the right hand and the left foot. Hold and find balance here. Make sure you're focusing on the planted limbs. Those are the ones that are going to give you the stability and balance here. And then put those limbs back down. 6, lifting the left hand and the right foot, finding stability and balance on the planted limbs, and then placing those limbs back down. Or take a few steps backwards. When you run out of space, you can start traveling in the opposite direction. Very good, very good. And bring that breath awareness back. I like to inhale as I lift my limbs and exhale as I plant them back down. There's a lot to think about here. So if you're feeling like this is a bit of a brain teaser, don't worry. That's the whole point. If at any point you need to stop and reset your crab position and continue on, that's okay too. And let's take some steps just to find the center of our space once again before we continue on. So from your crab, let's do a quick under switch and bring ourselves into a tabletop position. We're going to set ourselves up for some cat-cows. So make sure The very key difference between your tabletop and your beast position is actually the knees. So you'll notice that my knees here are roughly underneath of my hips. Normally in beast, I would have my knees farther forward, more like underneath my belly button. I'm going to bring my knees back so that they rest just underneath my hips. My hands are just underneath my shoulders. Fingers are spread super wide, gecko hands. I'm externally rotating my arms so that the pit of my elbow points straight ahead of me. And I'm finding a nice neutral spine to start. We're going to proceed with some cat-cows. This is also an opportunity to continue tuning into the breath and synchronizing the breath with our movement. So as we proceed into our cow position, we're rolling the hips forward, really engaging the lower back. Starting to take a long, slow inhale as we pinch the shoulder blades together and push them down away from the ears. The chest broadens and points forward. And then finally, we gaze upward. As we exhale, bring your chin to your chest, push the floor away, spreading your shoulder blades apart, and then squeeze your glutes, rounding the low back so that we're arching the whole spine away from the floor. Take an inhale, engage the low back, rolling the hips forward, pinch the shoulder blades together, open the chest, gaze up. Exhale, chin to chest, push the ground away, and then squeeze the glutes, rounding the low back. Gaze towards your knees or your belly button. Inhale, engage the low back, pinch the shoulder blades together, open the chest, gaze up. Exhale, chin to chest, push the ground away, and then squeeze the glutes, rounding the low back. And you can proceed through a few more of these cat-cows, thinking about trying to move through your whole spine like a wave, trying to feel what's going on in the head and the neck, what's going on with the shoulder blades, what's going on with the lower back and the hips. And the better we can control these three parts, neck, the shoulder blades, and the hips, the more we're going to be able to articulate the spine and also deepen our breathing. Cat-cow is a really good way to enhance our awareness of how our movements can enhance our breathing patterns or deepen the breath. I want everyone to find a neutral spine. Shift your hands forward just about one palm distance. Tuck your toes and then lift your hips up high, coming to a downward facing dog position. And just hold here, taking some deep breaths. Trying to roll the hips forward and find a straight line from the tailbone all the way to the wrists. Now, take a long, slow inhalation. And as you exhale, lift your heels from the ground as high as you can. Squeeze your glutes and round your low back. Think about your cat back here as you start to send your weight forward, rounding the whole spine as much as you can, pushing the floor away, and then lowering your hips down to the ground, pinching your shoulder blades together, inhaling as you gaze up. Exhale, chin to chest, push the ground away, lift the hips up high, and send them back to the peak of your downward facing dog. Hold here, take 3 deep breaths. My shirt's really bothering me. We're going shirtless today. That's what Thailand is for. So take a few more deep breaths in your down dog. On an exhale, lift your heels,
Squeeze your glutes, round your low back, round your mid back, round your upper back as you send your weight forward, lowering the hips to the floor.
Pinch your shoulder blades together. Inhale as you gaze up. Exhale, chin to chest.
Push the ground away. Slowly lift the hips up high, coming back to your downward facing dog. Take an inhale as your heels reach the floor. Take a couple deep breaths. Take another deep inhale. Exhale, lift your heels from the ground. Squeeze your glutes, round your spine. Send your weight forward. As you lower your hips to the ground, pinch your shoulder blades together.
Inhale as you gaze up.
Exhale, chin to chest. Push the ground away, waving back and up, sending your hips high. Inhale as your heels touch the ground. Exhale, lift the heels, squeeze the glutes, round the spine, send your weight forward. Lower your hips to the floor,
Pinch the shoulder blades together. Inhale, gaze up.
exhale, chin to chest, push the ground away, lift the hips up high, and then inhale as your heels reach the floor. Exhale, lift the heels, squeeze the glutes, round the spine, send your weight forward, lower the hips,
Pinch the shoulder blades. Inhale, gaze up.
exhale, chin to chest, push the ground away, waving back to downward facing dog. Inhale as your heels reach the floor or close to it. Exhale, lift the heels, squeeze the glutes, rolling, waving forward.
Inhale, gaze up.
Exhale, chin to chest, pushing the ground away, waving back and up to downward facing dog. Take some deep breaths. Inhale, bend your knees, bring your knees all the way to the floor, untuck your toes, and sink back into your child's pose. Breathe deeply. You can open up the knees a little bit wider, allowing the belly and the chest a little bit of extra space to inhale. And every time you exhale, just allow yourself to sink a little bit deeper into the floor.
Slowly walk your hands back. And we're going to find a seated position here. We're going to really raise some energy here. So this intention for this next little section of the class is actually to show ourselves how much energy we can release and we can raise simply by breathing. So I get this question a lot, Jared, why are your warm-ups so chill? People say, I want to be sweating more before I get into like intense movements and things like that. And I always say, well, then breathe harder and put more effort into the subtle little movements we do in our warm-ups, because ultimately we are responsible for the amount of energy and heat that we raise while we're warming up. Yes, we can move really fast and do 1,000 jumping jacks and get a sweat going, but that's a really mindless way to warm up. Much more mindful way to warm up is actually to be very intentional in the way we breathe and the way we move when we are getting ourselves ready for more demanding practices, like for instance, our primal salutations, which we're going to do in a few minutes after we do some breath work here. So find any comfortable seated position, ideally something cross-legged, but you're welcome to sit on a chair if you'd like. And we're going to begin with breath of fire, or Kapalbhati is the Sanskrit name. Basically, this breathing technique is rapid contractions using the diaphragm. Okay. So it's going to look something like this. I'll demonstrate first and then we can do it together. So watch my belly. So on and so forth. We're going to do a set of 108 breaths of fire. Okay, so this is going to take a while. You don't have to perform it super fast. Okay. In fact, try and keep time with me. I'll do it a little bit slower. Try and do it in sync with everyone. And we're going to do a total of 108. If it helps, you can put a right hand on your belly to feel the inward contraction with each exhalation. Okay. And don't worry too much about the inhalation. I want you to focus on just pushing air out with a rapid contraction of your diaphragm, a rapid contraction of the core, pushing air out of the nose. Naturally, the air will refill once your lungs start to get close to empty. Okay. You should, if you're contracting hard enough, by the end of this, you should have a pretty good burn in your core. So if you'd like, you can put one hand on your belly. We're going to take a couple of deep breaths, preparing ourselves for Kapalabhati. Take a complete breath in and begin Kapalabhati. Breathe out completely. Take a complete breath in and relax the breathing. Allow your breath pattern to normalize. And simply be aware and tune into any changes you notice in the body, any changes you notice in the mind. Let's take one more complete breath in. And then exhale through the mouth. And if your eyes were closed, you can open them now. So we're going to take this one step further. This is sometimes considered a progression of the breath of fire. This one is called the Bellows breath or Bastrika. And the reason why it's called Bellows breath is because we're trying to mimic a bellow. If you've ever seen a bellow, it's like two wooden handles with this sort of strange contraption. It almost reminds me of like an accordion. And you use the handles and you do this, and it pumps air out of a little nozzle, and it's designed to create a big flame. So you pump it, and it blows air into a fire, and it helps the flame become larger and larger. And so what we want to do is mimic a bellow using our belly, our diaphragm, our core. So this is a very similar technique to Kapalabhati, except instead of short, rapid inhalations and exhalations, or short, rapid exhalations, I should say, these are longer, still very intentional. We're still really contracting the core, but this time we're really trying to fill ourselves up with air as we inhale and then push it all out as we exhale. And it's going to look something like this. So every time you exhale, I really want you to draw the stomach in, draw the belly inwards towards the spine, and contract the core firmly. Okay. We're not necessarily trying to crunch and create a six pack. We're trying to draw the belly inward using the strength of those deeper layers of the core, like the diaphragm, the transverse abdominis. This one should create a fair amount of heat if we're breathing intentionally and with a lot of energy and contracting our core. I'm going to let you take this one at your own pace. I'm going to count for myself roughly 30 breaths. If at any point you get lightheaded, you can stop. Okay. Just normalize your breathing. But if you feel okay and you want to continue, just keep going. Okay. Again, you can put your right hand on your belly for this one if you choose to help tune into those diaphragmatic expansions and contractions. Okay. So whenever you're ready, you can begin bellows breath. With this one, try not to force or strain too much. We are trying to breathe strongly with some intention and some added energy. But if you're noticing excessive strain through the face, the neck, the jaw, I want you to release that and focus all of your attention, your energy on your core. If you feel like you've got a handle of your bellows breath, you can also add in a short hold of the breath between each inhale and exhale. So you might inhale, hold the breath in for 2 seconds, and then exhale completely and hold the breath out for 2 seconds. Inhale, hold the breath in, exhale, hold the breath out. Inhale, hold the breath in, exhale, hold the breath out, and continue. I want you to be able to hear your own breath as you do this. As you exhale and contract your core, as you hold your breath out, you might even squeeze the hips, squeeze the pelvic floor, squeeze your glutes, and then continue releasing the hips, inhaling, feeling the belly rise, feeling the chest rise, holding the breath in, and then exhaling, feeling the core contract, contracting the glutes and the pelvic floor, holding the breath out. Releasing the hips, breathing in, holding the breath in, exhaling, breathing out, contracting the core, contracting the hips, contracting the pelvic floor, holding the breath out. Breathing in, holding, breathing out, contracting, holding the breath out, and continuing for a few more rounds. Take a final deep breath in, sigh it out through the mouth, and allow the breath to normalize. Release your control of the breathing and allow it to start just moving on its own. Final exercise we're going to do here before we move into some primal salutations is a bellows breath in a hollow body position. So we're going to start to become very aware of how we need to breathe while our core is under tension here. We've talked about this a little bit in other classes. We're really going to focus in on this today. Simultaneous awareness of our breathing and of our movements as we proceed into our primal salutations in a moment. What I want you to do is stack your knees over your hips, keep a 90-degree bend at the knee, point the toes. Try to keep your knees right over the hips. We're not drawing them in towards the chest, and we're not extending them, at least not yet. And then from here, I want you to reach your fingertips up towards the ceiling. Take an inhale. And as you exhale, just like we did at the beginning of the class, I want you to lift your shoulder blades and your head from the mat, and even lift your tailbone and your hips from the ground as well. And then from here, I want you to try and proceed with Kapalbhati. Using the strength of your core to make those rapid inhalations and exhalations. It should be very difficult, but hopefully, if we build up enough strength in our core, it should be more than possible. Slowly lower your feet, lower your shoulder blades, bring your arms to the floor, take some deep breaths. If you were able to do that with some amount of ease, I want you to try extending your hollow body a little bit on this next round. This time we're going to be doing bellows breath or Bhastrika. This is going to be very difficult because it's very tough to breathe when our core is tightly contracted. But if you'd like to really challenge yourself, you can actually try this one with your legs extended straight and your arms overhead. That will be very, very challenging, but you can give it a try if you'd like. So again, let's start by stacking the knees over the hips, reaching the fingertips for the sky. Take a deep inhale. And as you exhale, lift the shoulder blades and the head, lift the hips. If you want a challenge, you can extend your legs straight and your arms overhead and proceed with bellows breath. If your core is starting to give out, come back to your tucked position and keep breathing. Let's do a few more. Even my core is really starting to give out now. And relax. Bring your feet down to the floor. Bring your arms down by your side, palms facing upward, and simply breathe. So hopefully we're starting to get an idea of how difficult just breathing with our core under tension should be and how effective breath work can be to get yourself warmed up. I don't know about you guys, but I do have a light sweat going. As we can, or as we could, if we really breathe strongly and intentionally and use our core. So we can slowly come up to a seated position. Now, just before we go into our primal salutations, I want everybody to try and use a very subtle but very important breathwork technique as we proceed through A, B, and C of our primal salutations. And this technique is Ujjayi breathing or breath of focus. And what this is a very subtle contraction at the back of the throat. And as you breathe in and out through your nose, that subtle contraction should make your breathing a little bit more vocalized. It should make your breathing a little bit more obvious to the ear, like you can quite literally hear your breathing. And it should sound something like the waves of the ocean, some people will say, or listening into like a conch shell. As you inhale, it makes some kind of a hissing noise. And as you exhale, it's a sharper hissing, almost like the waves of the ocean. It's sort of a deep sound as you breathe in and a sharper sort of hiss as you breathe out. And what this breath technique does is basically helps us bring our awareness into how our breath is flowing as we continue to move through our salutations or really through any kind of practice. So over time, if you utilize this technique enough, it will become habit and you won't have to really focus on that light contraction. It'll happen automatically and you'll naturally be much more aware of the breath as you perform other kinds of movements. Okay. Another small detail, while I do usually cue breathing, honestly, I don't necessarily believe that you have to inhale or exhale at certain points. I do find it feels much better to inhale or exhale at certain points because, for instance, if we're really contracting the core or collapsing our body inwards, it only makes sense to exhale as we do some kind of pattern like this, because there's obviously no space to breathe into. As our body opens up, it obviously makes more sense to inhale because we have this space to breathe into. All right. But otherwise, I really, this is kind of contradictory to most yoga teachers or how most yoga teachers teach. I really don't believe it's necessarily that important. You don't have to inhale at this point or exhale at this point. As long as you are breathing, as long as you are aware of your breath, that is the very important thing. So let's start getting into our primal salutations. I'm going to have everybody stand up and find your standing posture. Toes are spread wide, really digging into the floor. Make sure you've got a little bit of space in front of you and lots of space behind you. Take some deep breaths in your standing posture, feeling that energy rising up towards the head as you inhale and falling back down towards the bottoms of the feet as you exhale. Breathing in, feeling that energy rise. Breathing out, feeling that energy fall back down. On your next inhale, raise your arms up overhead. Bring the palms together, gazing towards the thumbs, pushing the hips forward slightly. And then exhale, sink down into your squat, and then bring your hands to the floor. Inhale, raise your hips up, trying to keep the spine straight, trying to get a deep stretch through the hamstrings. You might lift onto the fingertips or bring the hands to the shins. And take some deep breaths in your halfway forward fold. Take a long, slow inhale, lengthening the spine, deepening that stretch in the hamstrings. And then exhale, reach your hands for the floor. Allow the spine to round. You might bend the knees if necessary. And then step your feet back to plank. Hold the breath out. Slowly lower yourself down. Squeeze the glutes. Pinch the shoulder blades together. Inhale and lift the chest from the ground. Cobra pose. Exhale, lower your chest back down towards the ground, push the hips back and then up to downward facing dog. Take 3 deep breaths. Remembering that Ujjayi breathing, that breath of focus, finding that light contraction in the back of the throat so we can hear that oceanic sound of the breath. Inhale, bend your knees, tap your hips to the heels, gaze forward, and hop forward, landing as softly as you can in your squat.
Inhale, raise your arms up overhead and then stand tall. Push the hips forward, lean back slightly, straight into round 2. Exhale, sink your hips down into your squat. Bring your hands to the floor. Inhale, raise the hips up high, maybe lifting to the fingertips or bring the hands to the shins. Exhale, bring your hands down to the floor, full forward fold. Shift some weight into the hands, lift onto the toes. See if you can hop or float the feet back to plank. Hold your breath out, slowly lower down just to hover over the floor this time. And then inhale, peeling your chest, maybe all the way up to upward facing dog on an inhale. Exhale, chin to chest, push the ground away, waving the hips back and up to downward facing dog. Take 3 deep breaths here. Inhale, bend your knees, tap your hips to the heels. Exhale, right leg scorpion reach, meaning we bring the right knee to the left wrist as we exhale, contracting the core as hard as we can. And then inhale as we open up, sending the hips high, drawing that big circular pattern with the right toes, reaching them up and over the body and stretching, stretching, stretching out. Take a few deep breaths at the peak of your scorpion reach. On an exhalation, we're bringing that right knee back down and forward to meet the left wrist, contracting the core. And then inhale, pushing back to loaded beast. Exhale, left leg scorpion reach. Bring that left knee to the right wrist. And then inhale as we send the hips high, drawing that big circular pattern with the left toes, reaching them up and over the body, reaching across, stretching, stretching, stretching. Taking some deep breaths. On an exhale, bring that left knee down and forward to meet the right wrist, contracting the core. And then inhale as we push back to loaded beast. Exhale, gaze forward, hop forward, landing as softly as you can in your deep squat. Inhale, raise your arms up overhead, stand tall. Moving straight into Primal Salutation C. Exhale, sink your hips down into your squat. Bring your hands to the floor. Inhale, raise your hips up high. Exhale, shift weight into the hands, full forward fold. Float your feet back to plank and slowly lower yourself down. Inhale, upward facing dog. Exhale, chin to chest, pushing the ground away, waving back to downward facing dog. Taking 3 deep breaths. Don't forget about that Ujjayi breathing. Inhale, bend your knees, tap your hips to your heels, and then exhale for a right leg scorpion switch. Contract the core as the knee comes to the left wrist. And then inhale as you raise the hips up, draw that big circular pattern with the right toes, stretching, stretching, stretching so much so that we actually flip all the way over, landing in our modified crab. Take an inhale as you lift your hips up and reach your free arm up and over the head. Exhale as we lower back down. Inhale, lifting up for 2. Exhale down. Inhale as we lift up, getting some momentum this time. On 3, we actually flip up and over back to the peak of our scorpion reach. And then exhale as we bring that right knee down and forward, meeting the left wrist. Inhaling back to loaded beast. Exhale, left leg scorpion switch. Left knee meets the right wrist, contracting the core. Inhale, lifts the hips high. Draw that big circular pattern with the left toes. Stretch, stretch, stretch so much so that we actually flip over, landing in our modified crab. Inhale, pressing the hips up, reaching with the free arm. 1. Exhale down. Inhale, lifting up. 2. Exhale down. Inhale. This time we're going to get some momentum. and hit the peak of that scorpion reach before exhaling, bringing the left knee to right wrist, contracting the core, inhaling back to loaded beast. Exhale, gaze forward, hop forward, landing as softly as you can in your deep squat. Inhale, raise your arms up overhead, and then stand tall. Exhale, lower your arms down by your side. Take some deep breaths and simply relax. And we're going to very slowly bring ourselves down into a deep squat position. We're going to start to continue to be aware of the breath. We're going to finish off a little bit more of a meditative technique. But before that, we really want to open up our hips a little bit more so that our seat is super comfortable. So I'm going to give you a couple different techniques you can use for this one. For some people, it might be easier to get the fingertips or maybe even the full palm underneath the foot, wrapping your hand around the outside edges of your foot. For some people, myself included, I like to use my peace fingers, so index and middle finger, and hook them around my big toe. And then from here, what we're going to do, exhale, send your hips up high. Pull on your feet to help yourself get a little bit deeper into that forward fold. If you can't get your legs totally straight, don't worry about it. Just get your legs as straight as you can without forcing. And then inhale, come back down. Try and create some space with the hips so that your belly can expand and rise. And there's space there. Your thighs aren't in the way. So lifting the hips up, forward fold, pulling your feet to get yourself a little bit deeper. Inhale down. Exhale, lifting the hips, forward fold. Inhale down. Exhale, lifting the hips. Inhale down. One last time. This time we're going to hold our forward fold. Exhale, lift the hips. And we're going to hang here. You can release the toes or release the feet. Catch the elbows and just allow gravity to pull you a little bit deeper into the posture. Take some deep breaths and notice how as you exhale, as your belly draws in towards the spine, as your core contracts, you might be able to pull yourself a little bit deeper into your forward fold. As we inhale, we can create some space in the hips. Our belly rises and opens ourselves up. And then as we exhale, we can contract and use the strength of our core to pull ourselves deeper. Inhale, expand. Exhale, sink deeper. Inhale, expand. Exhale, sink deeper. Slowly bring your hips down back into your squat. And we're going to proceed with a few thoracic twists in our squat. So a couple different options for you. If you have difficulties holding your squat position, especially if your heels don't like to stay down on the ground, I want you to try and reach your fingertips for the ground. Okay. Option number 2, requiring a little bit more of a deep squat, is bring the full palm to the ground. Option number 3 is you can actually catch the opposite ankle with one hand. So we're going to start by taking a deep inhale with whichever variation you choose. We're going to take a deep inhale and lift our right arm up into the air, gazing up towards our right thumb and twisting through the spine as much as we can while we sink into our squat. Exhale, bring that right arm down and contract. Squeeze your chest together. Bring your shoulders together. Look down towards the ground. And then inhale, raise that arm up. Look towards the sky. You might even bring it back behind you. Exhale, bring that arm down. Contract everything together. Inhale, reach up and expand. Exhale, reach down and contract. Inhale, reach up and expand. Last time. Exhale, contract. Inhale, reach up, expand. Exhale, come back to a regular squat position. We're going to switch sides this time. So again, use whichever variation you just used on this opposite side. Inhale as you reach your left arm up towards the sky, expanding into that open space. Exhale, reach down, look down, and contract. Inhale, reach up and expand. Exhale, reach down and contract. Inhale, reach up, expand. Exhale, reach down, contract. Inhale, reach up. Exhale, down. Last one. Inhale, reach up. Exhale, down. And this time, we're going to slowly bring ourselves down into a comfortable seated position. Very briefly, bring the bottoms of your feet together. Interlace your fingers, wrapping them around your toes, and then flap your butterfly wings, flap your knees. Just helping to open up the hips a little further. And then you're going to find whichever seated position is most comfortable for you. You could be cross-legged. Some people actually like hero pose where you sit on the shins, more of like a Japanese meditation style seat. It's whatever seat you would like. And from here, put your hands on your knees, catch your knees gently. And we're going to take 3 cat-cows in our seated position. So as we inhale, we roll the hips forward, arch the low back, pinch the shoulder blades together, gaze up, opening the chest. Exhale, roll the hips backwards, chin to chest, spread the shoulder blades, draw the belly button in. Inhale, arching the back, pinching the shoulder blades, gazing up. Exhale, rounding the back, spreading the shoulder blades, gazing down. One more. Inhale, pinch the shoulder blades, arch the back, gaze up. Exhale, round the back, spread the shoulder blades, gaze down. And then inhale, find a neutral position and lengthen the spine, reach the top of the head up towards the ceiling. You can keep your hands rested on your knees or somewhere comfortably in your lap. You can keep your eyes open if you'd like, or you can close them. If you decide to keep your eyes open, just try and keep a soft gaze. So you might gaze slightly down towards the floor and just allow the eyelids to close just a little bit. And simply become aware of your natural breathing pattern. Breathing is a unique process because it is both manual and automatic. We've spent all this time today breathing intentionally and consciously, learning how to control our breathing patterns and synchronize them with our movements. But we can also just let them go and allow them to flow on their own. What I find interesting, though, is that in my experience, it's simply impossible to just let the breath flow on its own if I'm aware of it. Just the simple act of being aware of my breathing pattern has an influence on it. And over time, we start to question what is the difference between automatic processes and manual processes. Is there any difference between what we do and what happens to us? Is the breath something we do, or is the breath something that happens to us?
Food for thought. Slowly bring your awareness to your nostrils. Notice if one nostril is more open than the other. Perhaps they're both still closed. Perhaps they're both open. Just make a mental note of any changes. Make a mental note of any changes you feel in your whole body, in your mind. And simply allow your breath to be, allow your whole self to just be. Notice sounds in the room. You notice scents in the air, sensations on the skin, tastes in the mouth, colors dancing behind the eyelids. Bring your awareness or extend your awareness from your body out into the whole room. And when you're ready, you can gently open your eyes. So today's class was a little different than how we usually do things. There's a lot of breathing techniques today and a lot of core strength. I really hope this kind of opens your eyes to what, or at least how I define core strength and what I really truly believe is a much more beneficial way to train your core. We can do crunches all day and we can go and get a six pack and our abdominals can be great. But if we never develop an awareness of how our breathing pattern relates to our movement patterns, we're never going to actually have that strong of a core. And the more intentional and the more aware we become of our breathing patterns, the more we can enhance our performance in all kinds of other activities. So if you do cardio, think of it as cardiorespiratory training as opposed to cardiovascular training from here on out. Be as aware of your breath as you are of your steps if you're running, or of your strides if you're rowing, or of your cycles if you're cycling. Try and tune your breath or synchronize your breath with your movements. For instance, when I run, I try and time my breaths, 3 steps inhale, 3 steps exhale. You can do the same thing with rowing. You can do the same thing with cycling. And you can do the same thing with any kind of movement pattern and movement activity. You can basically turn all of it into some sort of a yoga practice or some sort of a breathwork practice, simply by being aware of your breath. And I promise you, if you practice it enough, it really will enhance your endurance, your strength, and your performance in all kinds of activities. So that was kind of the intention of today's practice. And I hope that that's starting to sink in. But I just want to thank everybody for joining me today. And as always, it's a pleasure to teach. I really do enjoy these classes.